Hello everyone, this is James Popham for CC311. I'm here with my second video for our Winter 2021 course. Today I'm going to talk to you about the role the internet and broader forms of media have had in shaping the way people come to understand what law means, what crime means, and what justice means. This is a very important concept and something that Ray Surratt spends a significant amount of time talking about throughout his textbook. And I want to draw your attention to the way the modern world has been influenced by outsider thinking. In October of 2017, an anonymous user of the controversial website 4chan posted on the /poll board claiming to have insider knowledge about American intelligence. Their username, called Q Clearance Patriot, seemed to imply that they had a high level of access to top secret information. In these postings, they made a number of vague and somewhat pretentious claims suggesting that the end of the New World Order was about to occur. In November of 2017, two 4chan moderators, along with a YouTuber, began to work together to explore further what had been posted by QAnon. This became a wildly successful YouTube stream. Their stream began to attract a number of notable guests, including a congresswoman named Lauren Boebert and a publicist for the Trump campaign, all seeming to add an air of legitimacy to the claims that were being made by QAnon. Later on in the year, a number of television celebrities with relatively large followings on social media began to give further credence to these claims, retweeting and sharing some of the comments that had been made. These included notable figures like Sean Hannity, a talking head for Fox News, and Roseanne Barr, the former star of a sitcom named after her. With their attention, we began to see significant public uptake about this idea that a conspiracy existed, the QAnon conspiracy. It claimed that a large group of wealthy people across the world were acting together to try to undermine the principles of democratic and civil society. Unsurprisingly, given the political ideologies of the B-list and C-list celebrities who had contributed toward the discussions thus far, the QAnon conspiracy was associated with the principles of the Republican Party of the United States of America. By extension, this meant that the Democratic Party of the United States was the antithesis to the ideas proposed by QAnon, that they were the ones that were perpetrating them. The QAnon conspiracies would come to play a significant role in the 2020 presidential election in the United States of America. The Democratic Party's candidates, Joe Biden and his running mate Kamala Harris, were very quickly associated with some of the ideas espoused by QAnon, such as the connection with pedophile rings and other attempts to undermine the solidarity of the United States of America. As we have seen over the last few weeks, this came to a head, leading to a number of protests and ultimately riots against the election of Joe Biden. Where this will take us, I'm not sure, but it gives us an important indicator of how new forms of media have really begun to influence the way the public understands what is right and what is wrong. Very early on in his textbook, Ray Surratt points to the historical patterns by which news used to be created. It went through a rather zigzagging process of starting with the observation of the crime, its report to police, its from the police being reported to the media via information pools, from there being picked up by news sources, being reviewed and recorded before being sent to an editor for fact-checking, and finally being sent out to the public via different formats, such as television news, newspaper, or magazines. One of the things that Surratt notes, however, is that the internet really short-circuits this pattern. Now, the internet can pick up on crimes at any point along the news process. It may be reported to the internet long before it becomes public knowledge via the police. It may be picked up by a crime reporter and shared via social media, or it may be the reproduction of news media that has been published. In some cases, this is a good thing. We've seen the positive effect that the immediate reporting of incidents can have for the public. On the other hand, There is some concern here that we must discuss, and specifically that relates to the veracity of the information that has been imparted. Namely, how accurate is the information, the crime tip, or the story that we've been hearing and learning about. Thinking again about QAnon, we know that much of the information that was posted by this user to 4chan was unsubstantiated. And in fact, many of the predictions that were made never came true. Nonetheless, they managed to capture the public's attention, leading to some pretty big impacts. The same can be said about many other cases that have occurred. For example, in 2012, Retta Parsons, a young woman living in Nova Scotia, was subject to rampant cyberbullying after her sexual assault was captured on video and shared amongst her classmates by the perpetrators of the events. While Retta had sought help from both her principal as well as the local police service, she found that she did not get the response that she had hoped for. The police went so far as to say there was nothing that they could do. Ultimately, after experiencing systemic and long-term bullying, Retta chose to take her own life. Her death finally prompted some official response. The RCMP launched an investigation into the causes of her death. It took Retta's death to spur significant public reaction. Local newspapers posted pictures of Retta, asking how this could have happened. National news coverage covered Retta's case, and again challenged the public to think about the impacts of cybercrime and cyber victimization on individuals. Eventually, local police agencies were spurred to investigate her death. However, they found that there was no case to pursue. It could have ended there, but Retta's death caught the attention of the anonymous group of individuals who populate the 4chan message boards. They took issue with the lack of response that had occurred from authorities, and they began to utter threats both against the authorities as well as the individuals who had perpetrated the sexual assault against Retta. Individuals purporting to represent Anonymous began to claim that they had located and tracked down the identities of the individuals who had been involved in capturing the video. Upon threatening to release those individuals' personal information to the public, the RCMP took action and launched a second inquiry into Retta's death. This ultimately led to a number of charges and some level of justice for Retta's family. While this outcome gives some idea of how the internet can elicit positive change, we must also be aware of the negative changes that occur all around us. The case of Retta Parsons is indicative of the symbolic creation of reality, something that Surratt speaks about in the second chapter of his textbook. In essence, this perspective holds that there is no such thing as an objective truth. Rather, reality is the cumulative effect of all the multiple perspectives we experience on a daily basis. The ideas coming from our parents and our family members, those coming from our employers and our co-workers, our peers and our friends, and, according to Surratt, most importantly, those that we experience through popular forms of media. Surratt provides us with a four-stage process that underlines the social construction of truth. Stage 1 relates to the physical world, and this is the imagery and experiences that might be occurring at any given time. Now, while I said that there's no such thing as an objective truth, this idea holds that there is a limited lens of interpretation on events that are occurring. A person wearing a red shirt, for example, will always be wearing a red shirt. The color doesn't change, but rather our interpretation of what the color red does. This forms up the second stage in the process, which holds that competing interests try to wrest control over how various cues are interpreted. You might here think about how the color red has been interpreted throughout history based on time and location. In the 1950s, for example, it was associated with the communist nations of Eastern Europe. More recently, the color red has been affiliated with the gang the Bloods, who originated out of Los Angeles and have come to play a significant role in organized crime throughout North America. The third stage in Surratt's process indicates that the media is an arena for these competing interests to battle one another. Now, ideally, the media should be an unbiased place where all interests are presented equally, giving an opportunity for the public to decide which one they like best. However, the reality is that there are certain interests underlying the way information is published. This stage is dominated by media adept constructionists who are able to leverage their positions of power in order to ensure that the public receives their interpretation of social events at the greatest level of volume possible. As a result, we have somewhat of a biased interpretation of facts. Finally, stage 4 is the simplest one to understand, and that's the winning of the constructionist competition. In essence, as things progress, ultimately a certain or finite number of interpretations of the events will take hold. These events often reflect the interests of the powerful and can undermine more popular interpretations of what's going on. In the end, we wind up with the looping effect that again was discussed in the first chapter of the textbook, where these interpretations are reified through continued presentation in fictional and infotainment formats. The outcome of these processes leads to the preferential treatment of claims makers in the media. These are individuals who have some level of vested interest in ensuring that their construction of facts is taken up by the public. In some cases, these claims makers might have underlying altruistic purposes. This is, for example, what Anonymous may have claimed when they began to pursue justice, or what they understood to be justice, for Retta Parsons. In many other cases, the underlying reasons for claims makers to take action remain hard to interpret. It could be political, it could be philosophical, or it could just be out of personal interest. Perhaps they have some level of capital gain to come from ensuring that their perspective is taken up. Nonetheless, these claims makers begin to take ownership of the issue at hand. Similar cases to the ones that they have spoken about may be associated with them in the press, or they may continue to garner public attention as they respond to case after case after case. Regardless of intention, claims makers often employ frames to shape the way the public interprets what's going on. Surratt gives us a list of several different frames which will be covered at length in class. For now, what I'd like you to consider is how the frames limit what people might think about or see when they consider a subject at hand. Throughout the semester, we are going to continue to look at the way the internet and internet-born forms of communication have changed and shaped the influence the media has on public perceptions of crime and criminal justice. We will look at important case studies, such as the Me Too movement or the tragedy of Sunil Tripathi, in order to clarify just what level of impact the internet has had. Simultaneously, we will look at how traditional forms of media work with the internet to continue to propagate certain claims and frames when it comes to interpreting crime and justice. I'm going to leave it there for now. Have a great week, and I'll see you in class. Such as the meaning